And let's do it. We got another 11 hours of baseball content ahead. First up, we have Austin Bristow. Hey, Austin. How we doing? Oh, you're on mute.
Hey.
There he is. A lovely shirt. Love the Pitcherless shirt. It's fantastic.
You. I thought it would be appropriate.
If you guys don't know Austin is a content manager here at Pitcherless. You've been here for about 3 years now, I believe.
Joined in December of 17, so I think that means we're both getting old.
Yeah, a little bit, Austin. But I'm excited for yours. You've actually talked about SBot, or Spot as you like to call it. We should just call it your thing. It is your thing after all. But I'm excited to see kind of presented in another way today. So I'm going to let you have it right now. Remember, everybody, go to go.rallyup.com/PitchCon. Support what we're doing, raising money for Feeding America, and you can win tons of prizes along the way. Here's to another fun day of PitchCon, day 2. Let's kick it off, Austin.
Oh boy, oh boy. Alrighty, y'all. Like Nick said, my name is Austin Bristow II. I'm one of the content managers here at Pitcherless. So welcome and good morning to a second day of PitchCon. It's going to be a great day. We got a lot of great stuff going. But first, before we get to that great stuff, you're stuck with me. So for the last few years, I've been working on and off on this project. So today I am proud to present SBot, stolen base opportunities taken, explaining Alberto Mondesi's value with a lot of numbers. So let's go ahead and get on into it. In my mind, there are 4 components to stealing a base. First, you have to actually get on base. As the old adage goes, you can't steal first base, so on-base percentage is obviously important. Speed is obviously the plus. You need to get to second or third base before the ball does. You know, the textbook definition of a stolen base. And knowing when to run is key. A runner has to understand who's on the mound, how quickly they get the ball to the plate, as well as how quickly the catcher can throw the ball to second. A lot of times this comes down to preparation, knowing, who you're up against as far as that goes. The 4th, in my mind, is choosing to take the jump. Now, we have statistics to measure the first 3 in on-base percentage, StatCast sprint speed, and stolen base percentage, or success rate. So what about the 4th? Now, to illustrate this, thanks, Ben. Love the support. To illustrate the importance of that 4th component there, let's take a look at 2 of the better base stealers in the last 3 years, Alberto Mondesi and Starling Marte. Now, both of them have had plenty of opportunities to steal bases. We'll get into that in just a moment. You see that Marte has actually had over 100 more than Mondesi. Luckily, though, Mondesi is a bit faster, though, of course, Marte is no Pujols. They're both plenty fast as far as stealing bases goes. You see they both have exactly the same 80% success rate in the last 3 years. So they are just as good at each other at, getting there. However, Mondesi has 31 more steals than Marte. That's because he chooses to steal more often. So what is SBot, or as Nick likes to call it, SBot? I prefer SBot. I don't know. It's a little simpler that way, I think. But SBot is my attempt to quantify the intentionality of stolen bases. It's simply calculated by taking the number of stolen base attempts, so successful steals plus caught stealing, divided by stolen base opportunities. Opportunities are defined in this as an instance when the runner is on first base while second base is empty. I could have included when the runner is on second base and third is empty. However, I feel like just doing first and second simplifies things a bit and is more than enough to determine intention, which is obviously the goal here. So I began actually developing SBot in 2018 after years of hearing analysts like Scott White talk about the unique way that players must choose to attempt to steal a base. Because, while every hitter comes to the plate when their turn is up and tries to put the ball in play, runners have drastically different plans and far more independent and personal control once they reach first base. The onus is much more in their hands at that point. So my original formula back in 2018 was far simpler. It was just attempts over times on base, so plate appearances times OBP. Obviously, there's some issues with that. That calculation included triples, home runs, and other instances where a steal was not possible. However, it was still enough to help me make some interesting observations about Billy Hamilton 2018. You see, that year was the first year that he had stolen fewer than 56 bases in a full season. Despite no drop in speed, he was still just as fast as the last year. However, you can see on the far right column there, his spot had steadily decreased since 2015, down to a 35% mark in 2018. Now, we'll get into more of the context of that in a moment, but you should know a good spot for someone that is actively trying to steal bases is 20% or higher. So 35% is very high, but it's obviously nothing compared to his 64% in 2015, which I've only seen in one other player since then. So his drop in spot in 2018, his drop in his intention to actually take the jump and run may have been the first signs of his decline. That is, unless we see a return next season, hashtag Billy Hamilton for Steals Leader 2021. Let's get that trending if we could. So, moving on. There we go. Let's take a look at some of the leaders in spot for the last 2 years combined. Since we had that shortened season, I'm just combining 2019 and 20. So you see here that Adalberto Mondesi has an absolutely ridiculous 62.6 spot. Now, in case any of you were wondering if that was due to a small sample in 2020, his spot this last season was 71.1, which is the highest mark I've ever seen, albeit that was a 60-game sample, but still, it was absolutely ridiculous. Essentially, he attempts to steal a base about 2/3 of the time he has an opportunity, which is crazy once you start looking at all the other numbers. A couple other interesting observations you can see here. Dylan Moore is not a good base stealer, but boy, oh boy, is he determined to keep trying. With that 62% stolen base rate, but a 36.6 spot. He is definitely going out there and doing his best. But it's interesting to see that he's still fast. He attempts plenty, and he gets a decent amount of opportunities. So it comes down to that third component I was talking about. He must not be doing his research and understanding how to get the right kind of jump. Now, let's compare this list to the attempts leaders for the last 2 years. So there is definitely a distinction between these two here. This is that third column in the players who have actually started to run and made attempts, as opposed to the rate at which they do so. As we go back and forth here for a moment, notice the differences in that second column, the opportunities. You see that in the attempts leaders, most of them are well over 150, save from Alex Smith, with a lot of them being over 200. Whereas over here, it makes a lot more sense that, if the denominator is lower, that they would have a higher rate. So while Whit Merrifield only has a 16.6% spot, he gets more opportunities than just about anybody in the league. He's actually, in the last 2 years, only had fewer opportunities than Marcus Semien and Freddie Freeman, neither of which have been stealing too much as of late. So you should also note here, Adalberto Mondesi is leading both of these boards with a pretty wide margin. He's basically in a class of his own right now, basically a master thief among common burglars. So let's talk about him a bit more. Due to his prestigious status as the best base thief in a landscape where very few are stealing 30, let alone 40 bases, we've seen Mondesi's value skyrocket. His current ADP is for 2021 drafts is sitting at 28.5. That is a second or third round pick, depending on how many teams in your league. So you are going to pay a premium to get Adalberto Mondesi's steals on your team. So, is he worth it? Kinda, but you have to know what you're drafting and plan around him. Take a closer look at Mondesi's young career at this point. So he debuted as a full-time player on June 17th, 2018. In those 75 games through the end of the 2018 season, he stole 32 bases while hitting for a 276 average with 14 home runs. That was good enough to get him the number 17 hitter spot in those last 75 games, that being in standard 5x5 leagues. Whenever I'm talking about any kind of ratings here, just know that I am talking about your 5x5 leagues with batting average, home runs, RBI, runs, and stolen bases. In his next season, 2019, Adalberto Mondesi actually battled both groin and shoulder injuries, which kept him to just 102 games. They did not actually decrease his speed. He actually increased it just a tad that next season. I figured, okay, he's got an injury on the books. Let me go see if his speed decreased. It did not. I believe he went from 29.3 to 29.5 in 2019. So, in his 102 games that he did play, he still managed to steal 43 bases with a 263 average and 9 home runs. That earned him a place as the 72nd hitter in 2019. So, not near as valuable, but still the best base stealer in the league in 2019. Let's look at the most recent season, our shortened 2020 that we just finished. He played almost every game, took advantage of that shortened season to stay on the field with 59 games played, 24 stolen bases, a 256 average, and 6 home runs. That was good enough to earn him the number 20 hitter spot. Now, it should definitely be noted, Mondesi had a very, very streaky 2020. Almost all of his value this last season came in the 24 games he played in September, the last few games of the season. During that final month, he batted .356 with all 6 of his home runs and 16 of his 24 steals. So I believe in that month, he was the best hitter in fantasy because he was giving you everything across the board. Now, if we look at his spot ratings year after year, he's actually only getting more aggressive. In 2018, when he debuted, he had an absurdly high 50% spot, running every other time he saw an opportunity. In 2019, he bumped that up a bit to a 58.1% spot and topped it by an absolutely ridiculous 71.1% in 2020. Like I said, at that point, he was stealing pretty much 2/3 of the times he had an opportunity. It was absolutely ridiculous what he was up to in 2020. So, is Mondesi worth that second or third round pick? I would say yes, but only if you accommodate for him. You ought to recognize that he can and should be the only player on your team whose primary draw is stolen bases. Because after you spend so much draft capital on him with that second or third round pick, you'll need to make up for the lost average and power elsewhere. You want to make sure you're filling in your team with everything else that he is not providing. You also want to make sure you don't draft him that high in a points league. That seems like should be common knowledge, but I know that there are some folks out there who are not like fantasy baseball aficionados that might be tuned in. Adalberto Mondesi is not even a little bit worth a second or third round pick in a points league. He finished with a 30% strikeout rate this last season. That's gonna hurt. Plus, he's not going to give you a fantastic average. He gives you some power, but again, his main draw is stolen bases. So in our 5x5 leagues, where those are basically just as valuable as home runs, count for a fifth of a player's value, that's where we're truly going to see the full value of Adalberto Mondesi come through. Give me just a moment here as I grab a sip of coffee and water, because I've been talking a lot in the last 15 minutes. Alrighty. Now, in the last few, I see in the chat there, he has had some injury issues. So you're definitely going to, you're definitely putting yourself in a bit of a risky situation if you are completely relying on Mondesi for all of your steals. If he's injured, you might be a bit out of luck. But we did see that in 2019, when he did spend a good portion of the season on the injured list, even with a groin injury that some might think would hamper his further base stealing, he still was one of the best, if not the best, base stealer in baseball. We will actually jump into Rykonaut. I will actually talk about that here in just a little bit, about some of the hitters without a top sprint speed, and talk about some of their some of the stuff that they will be doing as well. So, yeah. I absolutely would appreciate. Actually, this is a decent time. This is kind of a decent time. I'm going to take a few questions here, just because I don't have a ton to present, and I would absolutely love questions. So let me read a couple here. So, Professor Gingerbeard, which is a great name, you are only able to get one opportunity per plate appearance. Because I'm only taking an opportunity as when you're on first base with second base empty, that is the one plate appearance you will, or the one stolen base opportunity that you will get from that plate appearance. So yes, a stolen base opportunity, as far as SBot is calculated, is that a runner is on first base while second base is empty. Good question. It's a fairly simple calculation, but that is the hardest part to understand, is what exactly qualifies as a stolen base opportunity. And that has been something I've actually gone through a few different iterations of over the years. In 2019 is when I settled on this current calculation, after being provided some proper base running data to find those stolen base opportunities. I worked with Jeff Zimmerman of Fangraphs to get that data. Now Pitcherless has actually got access to that ourselves, which has made my research a heck of a lot easier the last few years. Correct. According to SBot, just measuring intentions of wanting to steal, I am not counting any steals of third base or home. So at this point, Dan PL Discord, I am not factoring in minor league stolen bases, because I don't know if I can get the stolen base opportunity numbers from the minors. I have wanted to look into that, and that's one of the next things I'll be doing, but I don't have at this point that opportunity, that base running data from the minor leagues. because I need the base running data specifically to factor in these stolen base opportunities here, I unfortunately cannot get into Spot from the minors at this point. I'm not sure if we have access to that. I'm going to be looking into it, like I said, but at this point, I haven't had the opportunity to get into minor league data yet. King be done. That is a good question. I'm not 100% certain on that. I'll have to look that up. He asked what the what percentage of steals are actually being considered here in Spot, since I'm only including first to second as opposed to second to third and third to home. That's a good question. I would, if I had to guess, because I don't have that number in front of me, I would have to guess it would be over 50% on first to second steals. Like I said, this isn't meant to include everything. It's just meant to include enough to understand intentionality and a player's, desire to actually take that jump and run when they have the opportunity. All right, I'll go ahead and keep on moving here. The next thing I've been looking at, and something I've been looking at basically just over the last month or so, is looking at the team numbers for Spot, looking at overall numbers as far as how many opportunities and how many attempts each team takes, and then breaking that down by who's managing the team, because obviously the manager has quite a bit of sway on a player's intention to steal bases. The manager gives the green light and sets the team's strategy on the base paths. So it's certainly going to be a pretty notable factor in how often a player is allowed to run, depending on who is managing their team. So, as you can see here, Buck Showalter, from 2010 to his retirement, I believe in 18, he hated running. He just would not do it. He had overall a 5.6% spot. Meanwhile, Ned Yost from 2010 to 19, he loved to run. A manager spot, really, if they're about 10% or higher, that's considered high for the entire team. So an 11.2%, that is definitely a very high percentage for Ned Yost's, 9 years that I have data of there. I've got access to data at this point going back to 2010. I'm probably going to be looking a bit further back as well, maybe about 2000, just to check out some of those earlier players there and see what kind of context I can get from looking back a bit further. So a lot of this does depend on the team that they have on the field that they're managing. As you can imagine, Mike Matheny has been one of the biggest ones that you can see a definite change in his years in St. Louis. He was consistently in the bottom 10% of manager spot. In St. Louis, his teams just did not run. However, in 2020, in his first year in Kansas City, Matheny led the league with a 14% spot because he had players like Whit Merrifield and Adalberto Mondesi on his team. So the team composition definitely has an effect on managerial spot. However, I don't have a lot of data on this at this point. I've just started working with this. This is kind of one of the new developments I've been doing, and a lot of it is quite promising. I just haven't been able to fully incorporate it into like individual player analysis up to this point. Yeah, MTM 1013. That is exactly the thing I was just talking about. So when players switch teams, you can often see a notable change in their spot. For example, when Christian Yelich went from the Marlins to the Brewers, his spot increased quite a bit as we saw him put up 22 stolen bases in his first season there and 30 in his second season. His spot prior to that in Miami was in the single digits, and then he was able to push it up to, I believe, off the top of my head, I'm thinking it was about a 15% spot in that first season and a little higher in his second, because Craig Counsell actually is one of the highest spot managers in baseball. You can also see the opposite happen when VR went from Milwaukee to Baltimore. Brandon Hyde is about an average level of spot. I believe he's sitting at about an 8%, 9%, something along those lines. When VR went from Milwaukee under Craig Counsell, who is one of the most aggressive managers, to a more average manager in Hyde, you saw that instead of stealing 50, 60 bases like he had done in Milwaukee, VR was now stealing, I believe he had 43 in his first full season in Baltimore there. Yeah, these are good questions. And I definitely want this to be something where I answer questions along the way, because this is definitely something that's still in development. I've got a lot that I'm still working on. And so your guys' questions will, I'm sure, spark things that I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So I appreciate questions coming in. So let's see. James, I have not yet looked into pitch count. That is another one of the things I will be looking into as far as the next steps. And we see Slee Rat Nation. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm going to go with Slee Rat Nation. Score, I believe, definitely would have an impact on spot as well. So yeah, a lot. I think some of the next steps that I'll certainly be taking are looking at situational spot, and seeing how the score or the pitch count and things like that, or even the batter that's up at the plate can affect things. I imagine that Ronald Acuna probably steals a little bit less when Freddie Freeman is at the plate than he would if, say, we got down to Ozzie Albies, who's not as good of a hitter, but who is a good of a hitter as Freddie Freeman. So, yeah. The one thing I worry about when looking at it at that granular of a level is that there either won't be enough data to see actual trends develop, and it'll just kind of be noise at that point. So I'm not sure how much value I can get from that at looking at kind of the situational in-game process of spot. I might be looking at it on more of a team level or even a league-wide level and seeing if there is a certain, if once we have all of that data, I can actually see trends at that point. Dan, that is another good question. I don't know if that is possible to look at. I've been working with one of the Pitch List data analysts here, Jeff Nicholas, who has been fantastic in getting me all of my raw data that I've been working with over the last 2 months in preparation for this presentation. And up to this point, I haven't actually asked about pitch outs or pickoffs. I'm not sure if we do or do not have data on that. That could certainly be something that I think would be very close in as far as if you have a high spot, you're going to have a high pickoff throw rate, I guess. Pickoff rate at that point. I imagine they would be pretty closely correlated. So I could definitely look into that as well. Moving on now. The thing I am actually most excited about that I've been putting the most time into since I've gotten access to multiple years of data, the last decade of data here, is projecting stolen bases using Spot. All right, so stick with me here as I'm going to run down what is a relatively simple projection model. I don't know if any of you guys caught the how to build your own projections yesterday or in the afternoon. This is definitely going to be a much simpler model. Like I said, I've been working on this for about a month or two at this point. And this is just kind of the first iteration of a projection model that I'm working with here to include the intentionality that SBot measures. So how I'm doing this is first we take, working from the right to the left, we look at how many opportunities a player gets per plate appearance. This correlates decently with on-base percentage. So you see guys like Christian Yelich and Juan Soto have a higher op per plate appearance than guys like Adalberto Mondesi. So they're going to get more opportunities in general. Then I'm going to multiply that rate by the number of projected plate appearances. I've used Ariel Cohen's ATC projections for this. They're just my personal favorite. This helps us determine how many projected stolen base opportunities a player will have in 2021. A lot of this is just kind of working backwards in rates. Next up, we take how many projected opportunities they're going to have, multiply that by their last 3 years of SBot data. This is going to give us how many projected attempts they will have. Since SBot is just attempts over opportunities, that multiplication just turns into how many projected attempts. Lastly, we multiply that one more time by the last 3 years of the player's stolen base rate, their stolen base success rate over the last 3 years, to determine how many successful stolen bases they ought to have in 2021 or the following year. So again, this is a very simple formula compared to a lot of the professionally published projections like ATC, Steamer, and the like. I've only just started working on this for about a month or so, but it is definitely promising as I've worked through a bit of data here. Alex, I have not yet taken in lineup spot into consideration. Again, that's kind of the next step, is I'm going to be looking more into team-wide statistics instead of individual statistics. That's what I've been doing a lot of stuff on individual players, but I think the next step for SBot is looking more at the team and even league-wide rates to see if say we see Ronald Acuna move from the leadoff spot to the third spot in the order, which I don't think is going to happen. But if that were to happen based on Brian Snitker's strategies, should we expect to see Ronald Acuna steal less or be less aggressive? I think that's kind of the next step. Good question. So with this stolen base projected stolen bases, I actually tested it out. I used the data from 2016, 17, 18. Like I said, I basically used the last 3 years of data when considering this. And I threw it into the model to see how it would do projecting the stolen bases from 2019. I used the actual plate appearances that they had in 2019 as opposed to their projected plate appearances. And a lot of these you see seem to be a little off, but a lot of that can be explained by extenuating circumstances. Like I mentioned, Christian Yelich went from Miami to Milwaukee, where Craig Counsell was far more likely to give him a green light. And so you see we only had 1 year of his Milwaukee data actually considered in this. And so 2 of the 3 years of data that I was considering were from Miami, which understandably gives us a much lower rate than the actual 30 stolen bases he got. Likewise, I mentioned Jonathan VR before, who after leaving Craig Counsell in his very aggressive style, stole a few less bases than the 52 that SBot projects him to get. So while a lot of these seem off, a lot of times they can be explained. Trevor Story, for example, in his first couple seasons didn't really steal a ton of bases. His SBot jumped massively in 2018 from about a 8% rate to around a 18% rate. So there's definitely going to be a bit of variation here, as anytime a player will switch teams or things along those lines. So if we look at then the projected spot for this upcoming season, you can see I've compared it here to Ariel Cohen's ATC projections, and a lot of these look pretty similar. SBot thinks a few guys are going to be a little more aggressive, notably Mondesi, Trey Turner, with Merrifield, etc. Merrifield had a weird set of spots. If you look at 2020, he is back up to about a 23% spot, which is very good if you're looking for someone that's actually, this is someone you're going to be targeting your drafts to steal bases for you. But in 2019, that's the year he only stole like 10 bases. And in that year, he had like a 9% spot. If you're in single digits, you're basically not trying at that point. So having all of those numbers mixed in, I think we're going to see Merrifield bounce back. And I legitimately think he could be a 30 stolen base guy again. Alex, I had talked about this just a little bit before briefly. I have not taken into account situational spot yet, just because I've mostly been working with individual player data up to this point, and a lot of that would be noise. So I will be definitely looking into that over the next year or so as I continue to develop everything with this, but I'll mostly be looking at team and league-wide situational data there, as far as how many outs, what the count is, things like that. So a lot of this, as far as my 2021 spot projected stolen bases, they seem to agree overall with ATC's projections. There's not very many just major discrepancies, except for Manny Margot. ATC likes Margot quite a bit, projecting him for 22 steals. SBot is a lot less optimistic, giving him only 16. I know he was more aggressive in 2020. Should be interesting. I've been a fan of Margot for a while, but I don't know that he's going to get enough opportunities. Being in Tampa, I'm not sure if they're going to play him all the time, so it'll be interesting to see if he will have the opportunities needed to push over that 20 stolen base mark there. So let's go ahead. I've been talking a lot about how I develop this and how it is used and stuff like that. Let's give you all some actual actionable data. I'm going to give you five late round targets that, based on my information that I've seen here, could be great to bolster your stolen bases if you had up to this point basically ignored the stats. So grab your pen and paper here. Here's your actual draft advice. First on the list, John Beardy. He is one of the fastest players in the league. I believe he's got a sprint speed of around 29.4. That's very fast. And he has a very respectable 22.1% spot over the last two seasons. He's projected to be the opening day second baseman for Miami. There's a good chance that he could give you up to even 30 stolen bases. SBot projects him for 28 in the upcoming season. Next up, Miles Straw. Now that George Springer is out of the picture, Straw is actually projected to be the opening day center fielder in Houston. He has a 22.6% spot. He's got around a 28.5% sprint speed, feet per second there. And he should see enough opportunity unless Houston has better options in center. But at the moment, he seems to be the guy. SBot projects him for around 29 stolen bases, and he's going real late in drafts, 408 ADP at this point for 2021. Next guy, you've definitely heard of Sam Hilliard. He's a very toolsy guy. He's very fast, 29.3 feet per second there for Hilliard. I don't have enough data on him since he hasn't gotten a true opportunity to actually get playing time here. I don't have enough data to project him yet, but if he is given ample playing time, which he is projected to be the starting left fielder at this point in Colorado, He's got the potential for a power speed combo. I could see him stealing 20 plus bases with 15 home runs if he actually gets the opportunity. So again, Hilliard, he's a bit of a riskier pick as he's not succeeded very much yet in the majors, but could be good. Next one I have is Christian Pache. He's projected to be the opening day center fielder for the Braves. He has been touted as one of, if not the best, defensive outfielders in professional baseball. So that in and of itself, his plus glove should keep him in the lineup, even if he struggles a bit at the plate. He does have plus speed at 28.9 feet per second. I think the Braves are going to keep him in the lineup. It's just a matter of whether or not he's going to attempt. And we've seen guys like Albies and Acuna get plenty of opportunities. Snitker seems to be willing to keep the Braves aggressive on the base paths at this point. So Pache could be kind of an under the radar sleeper pick at a 336 ADP for you. And as a Braves fan myself, I do think he's going to consistently be in the lineup. I think they're ready for him to be at the major league level, and his glove is going to be good enough to keep him getting regular at bats. Last one I have here is a bit of a long shot, but it is Anthony Alford. This guy is very, very toolsy. I have been following him since he was a prospect with Toronto. And he is now projected to be the opening day center fielder in Pittsburgh. He's a ridiculous athlete with a 29.7 feet per second sprint speed. He's only ever gotten a cup of coffee at the majors. He's actually finally is no longer rookie eligible after getting about 4 or 5 cups of coffee between the Blue Jays and the Pirates. So he hasn't been able to succeed at the plate yet. But the Pirates are the worst team in baseball, unless you ask Fangraphs, who think Baltimore has a 0% chance of making the postseason. So with him being a member of the Pittsburgh team, he's going to get every chance to succeed because, again, he's very toolsy. He's got lots of power, raw power, and clearly lots of speed, and he's free in drafts. I don't even know that he's a guy that I would want to draft outside of like an NL only league, but this is definitely someone that I would keep an eye on in the first few weeks, see how he's doing, see if he's getting consistent playing time. And if you need a boost in stolen bases, Anthony Alford could be a very cheap pick for you as far as that goes. All righty. So what is next for SBot? I've talked a bit about my plans going forward. Like I said, this is very much something that is still in development at this point. Even though I've been working on it for 3 years, it's still definitely in development. I'm pretty happy though with how SBot itself is calculated. I think it does its job in showing intentionality and quantifying that well. Not to say I won't still consider ways to potentially better reflect that base runner's intentions, but I'm pretty pleased with that. So I don't know that I'll be playing with that too much. I do want to keep refining SBot projected stolen bases by likely incorporating manager spot or toying around with weighting the recent years more heavily, maybe weighting the last year more heavily, things like that. So that's something I'm going to be playing with quite a bit, but I think that is definitely something that could be useful as far as projecting stolen bases there. And of course, I'm just really begun working with manager spots and looking at team-wide rates and things like that. I've mentioned quite a few times up to this point, that is kind of where I'm going to be focusing my attention next is team-wide trends and even league-wide trends. And you guys hit the nail on the head. I want to look at things like situations, whether players are more likely to steal in a 2-0 count than they are in a 1-2 count, for example. Or if I would have to imagine if there are 2 outs, SBot goes down across the league extremely quickly. I'd also love to see a spot leaderboard at Pitcher List by the All-Star break. That would be great. I know Nick and I have talked about it. Jeff Nicholas and I have talked about it. So I think it's definitely possible. I'd love to see that happen. So hopefully I can just, stay in Nick's ear and keep bugging him long enough to actually make that a thing where you guys can come and see real-time spot data and the trends that are developing as far as that throughout the season. All righty. Before we get into questions, which I am happy to take as many questions as people have, I do want to give a few special shout outs and thanks, especially to Dave Sherman, Nick Pollock, and Mikey Ahedo for talking through the many iterations and developments of Spot I've had throughout the years. I also want to thank Paul Spohr and Jeff Zimmerman for giving me my initial access to the base running data needed to calculate Spot. And last but probably most important is a big thank you to Jeff Nicholas. He has been a fantastic help as a data analyst in providing me the raw data and formatting all of it so that I could put together this presentation. Without him, boy, oh boy, I would have had a ton more work on my plate. So thanks a lot, Jeff, for that. All righty. I will now take all of the questions.
Hey, Austin. Hey,
Hi,
buddy.
Nick.
That was a fantastic presentation, man. I may be in on Mondesi now, considering like I go for empty power bats all the time, right? And if I find myself in the first round going, all right, I'll take Soto, and thinking maybe he isn't going to steal as many bases as he's going to say, and then just get Mondesi, and then you can go and get like Nelson Cruz and Arenado and Gallo and Castellanos and all that stuff.
Yeah, spot projected stolen bases only projects Soto for about 11 steals.
Right, but I mean, there's the quote that he had in spring training about like he wants to steal more, and he's stolen more each year, or he's at least more aggressive, right? So
yep, his spot has steadily increased. So yeah,
it's weird. Maybe if you get Trout, you can pair it. That's a better one. Let's go.
There you go.
But yeah, now you might be pulling me in. Like I thought I was so out, and everyone's like fading Mondesi, but it's like, yeah, but he's such an outlier for it.
He is legitimately in a league of his own. The only time I've seen numbers like his, that 60% rate, is peak Billy Hamilton back in the day.
Right. Oh, Billy. Yeah, I remember the arguments for him being like a second rounder easily, all that kind of stuff.
And Mondesi is definitely a better hitter than Billy Hamilton ever was, so that definitely helps as well.
Sure. Asher Drittel is saying Nick stays strong, no Mondesi. Well, did you just watch the presentation, Asher? I don't think you did. All right, it's hard.
I had like 3 slides devoted to Mondesi and whether or not he's worth it.
Understandably so. So a couple things to talk about really quickly. I obviously want this on our leaderboard too. There are a lot of stats that we've made over the years that I do want to incorporate. I just want to give a heads up to everybody about that stats leaderboard. You probably won't see many shifts of what kind of data we provide and do until we change, or at least not change, but adapt essentially StatCast stuff, which is very expensive. It's not cheap to get that stat stuff. So with your support of the site, if you can get PL Plus, all that kind of stuff, that's where it will be going to. I'm not even joking. You guys know me. Like, I don't take anything from Pitcher List. So the money we raise, like, it will go towards making our stats and leaderboard and player pages even cooler. So hopefully we can all get there together and get Spot the attention it deserves for everybody. So I guess, I mean, there are a lot of interesting questions and ways that people were going about it. Like they were talking about the count, right? Or position in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a really good point. But that's kind of like a step of the process, right? The first is like just how often are they in that opportunity? And that's what you're doing with SBot, right? And then from that, it's like, okay, then how many times are they like put in a position to have that opportunity? Like it keeps going in different levels. You know what I mean? So having this foundation, I think, is honestly Like you can go deeper like that, but a lot of that's just noise. Like I don't know how often he's going to be in a 2-2 count or something like that, and just
Right. That's why a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the time when I do plan to look into kind of those more situational stuff,
Mhm.
I'm just not sure how valuable that will be on a player specific level.
Right.
But I'll be looking at that at a more team based level.
Mhm.
I did want to answer one question from the chat. King Be Done, my good buddy. I play in 2 leagues with him. Went to high school with him. Great guy.
Nice.
He was asking about any former players that I have data on that were really eye popping. Rajai Davis back in like 2012 put up a 56% spot.
Look at that.
Yeah, he was nasty back in the day. D. Gordon at 45 in that same year. So there are a few that you can see where they're definitely going out there and doing their best. Blast from the past, Coco Crisp in 2010 had a 43% spot. So there are definitely times when you can go ahead and see those massive numbers come out of there. A lot of times, parsing my way through the data, you gotta not include times when players only attempted like 5 stolen bases, because then they can have like a 90% spot because
Right.
they had like 6 opportunities and ran 5 times. But
Yep.
it's just a matter of parsing through all the raw data.
I think this is such a cool stat, man. I mean, we don't, we just go like, all right, he's got this amount of stolen bases. And I've certainly been guilty over the years of like seeing 2018, 2019 numbers. And then, oh, he's like 22 in this one and then 20 in that one. I think he'll get like 25 or something like that. And this is way more illuminating. I mean, you talking, I think the most interesting thing that you really brought up was Craig Counsell versus the Marlins, right? In that example, saying like,
Yeah.
hey, when you shift teams, we talk about that a decent amount. Oh, VR goes to the Orioles and now he's at the top of the lineup and like he'll be able to steal as opposed to another club. But we don't have any sort of data for it. It's just kind of conjecture. And you actually say like, no, 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 Ned Yost, like go ahead and do that. I was wondering though, maybe Mondesi is pushing the Yost number up. But at the same time, like that's not fair to remove that either.
Well, Mondesi was only on 2 of Ned Yost's teams.
Oh, right. So how long was that going back for?
That I have data through 2010.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay. So
Yost,
Mondesi, very small sample of that.
Yeah.
So that's Youst ball, baby. That's
yeah. So it just so happened that this fantastic base stealer also was debuted with a manager that loved to steal
Right.
bases in the first place.
And
if
it really-
Mondesi had debuted with Buck Showalter, we could be talking about a
Right.
very different player.
And it really helps out with Merrifield as well. Really
Mhm.
encourages that, yeah, we do think he is going to be that 20 to 25 stolen base guy again. I love the Dylan
Yeah.
Moore one, by the way.
Yeah,
That made me happy.
he keeps trying. It's got like a 60 something percent success rate. What I thought was really interesting as one of the initial takeaways from looking at manager spot was Matheny's change in his rate, because when he was with the Cardinals, he had one of the lowest spots consistently. He was around like a 5-6% consistently with the Cardinals. But as when in his first season now with Kansas City, we see he's up at like 16%, which a lot of that has to do with his team, of course, because he's got Mondesi and Merrifield, but he is still giving them the green light. So that
Right.
he's definitely got a say in that.
I do wonder if like you have a new manager and sometimes they're just like, all right, the older guys, like do what you were doing. I don't want to step on too many toes right away.
I have seen a little bit of that. For example, when Brian Snicker came in as the new manager of the Braves, his spot rate was very similar to Freddie Gonzalez, his predecessor. However, you see in the second year, it is more similar to what he's had since then. So you're actually correct. That is reflected in the data I've got.
Oh, there you go. See, it's all here.
And that's the interesting part about the statistic, because it is. I am trying to measure and quantify the psychology of players and managers, the intention. A lot of it is like, I wonder if this, then that, and can you see if the numbers back that up.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's such a weird thing because, like I said, every player, every batter comes up to the plate on their when it's their turn every time. They don't have a choice, and they want to succeed. They want to put the ball in play. However, once you're on first base, Albert Pujols has got a very different strategy than Adalberto Mondesi.
You just
Pujols
had
is
to
going to
throw Pujols under the bus. Come on, man. The guy's a legend.
He's got a sprint speed of, I
So he's
believe,
trying his hardest, all right?
21 something feet per second.
Come
His,
on.
he's got plantar fasciitis in both
How
feet.
dare you? He
He's
is the machine still, okay? But last question I have for you, Austin, because we're hitting up on the time here. So you put out an article on SBot. Sorry, Spot. I'm gonna train myself. I'll get there. It's Spot. You put out an article, I believe, around this time last year, correct?
Yeah, I did. The first one came out in 2018, and I did the Spot Revisited article in 2019.
Okay. Is there another revisited article coming for 2021? I would imagine like the stuff that you presented today is very helpful. I mean, you were selling us on Mondesi here.
Yeah,
And
I
actually
think
having that revision because we don't have this accessible information.
Yeah, I think I'd absolutely love to do another, Spot 2.0, 3.0, whatever
Right.
article for the site.
Just call it 6.0. That's fine.
So I definitely want to get a bit more information on team-wide trends and manager spot before I put that out. So I'd imagine we'll see that around April or May, around that time. So
Cool.
be working pretty closely with Jeff Nicholas. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he really is. I've worked with him myself. He's fantastic.
Love the guy. Every time I'm like, hey, could I get this? It's like a few hours later. He's like, yeah, here's multiple years worth of data. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the whole data science crew that we have are just incredible, and Jeff is a wonderful representation of it.
Absolutely.
But Austin, really, this is so cool. I can't wait to be talking more about it. I mean, we have all these like random stats that we haven't really, showcased properly, I think, on the site, like the old VPR. Remember that from 2015?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. I still feel like that's a thing. Unfortunately,
it could be. You just have to.
CSW was one, and then unfortunately, like Fast, they're like, Nick, I think we gotta like go on this more, and he put out that article, and thank the Lord he did so, because I was not going to. But yeah, so stuff like that. I think we actually have others from across the staff too, so I'm looking forward to giving them more exposure on that. But Austin, this was a fantastic presentation. Thanks for being part of PitchCon, and yeah, I mean. Now I might have to raise Mondesi more. And
I would just I just thank you, Nick. I legitimately feel honored to present my own original statistical analysis alongside some of these very, very smart people who I think are way better at doing this stuff than I am. So I feel honored to be alongside them.
No, we're absolutely thrilled that you're here doing this. And by the way, if you want more Austin Bristow, you guys should be subscribing to On the List. Used to be only on the Pitch List feed, but now he has his own feed. Amazing saxophone theme to start it and a new album cover as well. And he's doing it weekly now. So Austin, give him a listen. And thank you so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.